And there were three thoughts that went through my head immediately. The first one was, I'm probably going to die today. It was a weird feeling. It didn't feel like a cramp. It's just kind of looking at my hand, telling my fingers to bend, and they won't bend.
What was going on in your mind when this was happening?
Just honestly shock. What is going on? I wanted answers, follow-on tests. Came to find that I have multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease, and the immune system basically attacks your central nervous system.
For men, mental health, talking about it, feelings and emotions. I hate to say it's not normal for us.
It was kind of hard for me to talk about all this stuff up until recently, and then it's like, well, you should tell people that this is hard, that you're scared, that you have anxiety, because it's not a sign of being weak.
You competed at the 2024 CrossFit Games.
There's actually neurological impairment division in the adaptive CrossFit Games. I finished 6th in the world in semifinals, got to the games. Exactly 1 year to the day that I was discharged from the hospital, I was on the podium with the second place medal.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the InnerFight podcast. I hope you're having a fantastic week, and I hope you're ready for an insane story. Today, I'm talking to a guy who first emailed me over 15 years ago. We had a number of emails back and forward about mindset, about training, and just sharing different ideas. Unfortunately, just over a year ago, today's guest was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a condition that, as he explains, just attacks the body. However, with his mindset and his attitude, the only thing he could think of is, how can I get better? And taking that mindset and attitude on a daily basis saw Thom stand on the podium of the adaptive 2024 CrossFit Games this summer just gone. Thom Szymanski is an incredible human being. His story is absolutely inspiring on so many levels. In this show, he shares the insights, the powerful connection that he's had between his fitness journey and also his mindset journey, some crazy training routines, and also, a lot of the time, some really emotional hurdles that not only him, but his family have had to overcome during his illness, his recovery, and his desire to get better every single day. He's an incredible human being. It was an absolute honor to have him on the show. It has been an honor to have him as a friend of our community from a distance in America for the last 15 years. And to get him to chat about his story today is just absolutely awesome. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity. And something new, don't forget to follow us and hit the bell button to receive alerts on new content on our YouTube channel. You like that? It's not just click and subscribe. Anyway. This is episode number 948 of the InnerFight podcast. No matter where you are in the world, as I always say, thanks a lot for tuning in. Let's jump into today's show.
Let's jump into it then. Thom, welcome to the show. It has been 15 years coming. Wow. It's been a while.
It's definitely been a while. I remember the original InnerFight website, kind of a WordPress, I think, at that point. And now, look at where you're at right now. So 15 years, a lot can happen in fitness and on the internet.
It's interesting. And I guess that's probably important for people. We first connected 15 years ago through the internet. You're absolutely right, mate. It was a WordPress website. And I guess that's what's beautiful as well about the internet and communication. We were just talking and we were just sharing different ideas on life, on training, and on mindset. So mindset's been something that's been important to you for a long time, Thom. Tell us a little bit about, how do you see mindset?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go back to kind of the origin story of InnerFight for me and talk a little bit about that. So I was playing rugby at university, and we also had some tours overseas, and I was looking for a different way to train in the off season. And one of my buddies, a winger actually, he told me about something called InnerFight, and he was like, you got to try this thing because it's not just picking up heavy weights, putting them back down, but you really have to be engaged. It challenges you, functional movement. And I got into it. And I think that that was the first time that I actually connected mindset with fitness and training, because in InnerFight, and it's probably not unique to InnerFight, but functional movement at that time was a new thing. It really required me to 100% be present. And moving throughout life after I got hooked on the InnerFight Kool-Aid, if we could call it that, I realized, no matter how hard the workout is, no matter what life throws at you, you've always got a choice of whether or not to finish that last round of box jumps, pick the weight up, go to work when you're not feeling it, or, if life throws you a curveball, just to say, let me take my moment, reset, and reorganize. And life has definitely thrown me a couple curveballs since I started InnerFight. And that show no weakness mindset has really been an important mantra for me. And also my interpretation of it's actually evolved over the past 15 years too. So
that's an interesting point. And how is it, because a lot of people ask me that question, or ask us the question, is like, what does this show no weakness actually mean? So and the fact that you said it's kind of evolved, talk us through that a little bit, mate.
Sure. So 15 years ago, I was a little bit younger than I am now, maybe a little less wise. And I think initially the show no weakness for me kind of meant trucking through it, muddling through it, no matter what, keeping a stiff upper lip. And that certainly is that there's a time and a place for that, I think. But as I got older and as I realized, life threw me these curveballs that were hard, or workouts were hard, the show no weakness mantra had to change in my mind, because I was telling myself this isn't hard, it shouldn't be hard. When in reality, a workout like Murph, for example, is a hard workout. And anybody you would talk to would say, like, yes, it's a hard workout. So for me, the show no weakness mentality shifted from saying, like, no matter what, like, no, Murph's not that hard, you just need to try harder, to being more comfortable with saying to friends, relatives, myself, this is a hard thing and I'm going to do it anyway. This is a hard thing and I'm going to get better because I've gone through it. Or, using the Murph example, when you're in a group and doing Murph, you see everybody sweating, suffering, but also smiling. Being hard or going through something hard doesn't mean it's a terrible experience. In fact, I would say that it's going to make you a better person on the other side. So the mindset, I think, went from a stiff upper lip kind of mindset to one that just allowed me to build camaraderie with folks through difficult experiences and saying, like, yes, this is a hard thing.
It's super interesting, because when you mentioned there, like, your younger self is just like, I can run through this brick wall. And I think that's how I started as well with it a lot. I was like, we can do anything, and bang in the chest. And that's why I was interested to get when you said, okay, it's changed a little bit. That's why I was interested, because I kind of feel a little bit the same. But for me, it's always a little bit like, don't complain about something that you can't change. We'll get through this. We'll get through it. But yeah, I think at the start, a lot of people are like, banging their chest and stuff. But it's very interesting to see. Now, mate, there's a lot in between, but one of the main things that I think is really important, and we'd love to talk about, and we spoke about this over Instagram, is in September last year, your life somehow changed. You got a curveball. Tell us what happened.
Sure. So last September 2023, I came down with a pretty bad stomach virus at the beginning of the month. And like anybody, not an unusual thing, I spent the weekend basically just eating soup, bread, and resting. And then finally, when I started to feel like I could get back to the gym, it was middle of the following week, I noticed that my body just felt a little bit different. But I attributed it to the fact that I hardly ate anything, was sleeping. Things felt tight. I felt very tired. And then on Friday, a week after I came down with this stomach bug, I said, it's time to get back to the gym and, hit a workout. So I'll never forget this. I was doing air squats for a warm up. And if you've ever seen the movie Bambi, where Bambi's trying to learn how to walk, my knees were buckling, my legs were feeling like Bambi. I actually texted my brother Chris, and I said, like, it feels like I've never squatted before in my life. And again, I attributed it to just the stomach bug and kind of getting back into it. And then I went over to the bench. I was going to do a circuit of air squats, bench, and running. Nothing too crazy. And my warm-up weight that I could usually do 30 reps, I struggled with 5. So again, thinking, hey, this is just the stomach bug. I'll be good. I went through the workout, and then I said that workout wasn't that hard. So let me do another one of thrusters and bar-facing burpees. And when I went down with just the bar and tried to press out overhead, my left arm was completely numb and like pins and needles. And again, the same thing with the squatting. So I attributed it to a pinched nerve or something along those lines, finished the workout, went throughout my day, and I noticed I started to develop a limp, which in my mind, I thought to myself, hey, I had done a CrossFit competition 3 weeks before with my brother and my sister-in-law, came down off of a bar muscle up and kind of tweaked the calf. So I thought maybe this re-aggravated it. No big deal. Went throughout the day, but I'll never forget this, actually. This is where I start to realize things were not just stomach virus or tweaked muscle. I went to scratch my left ear with my left hand, and I couldn't bend my fingers on my left hand at all. And I thought to myself, well, this is kind of strange. This has never happened before. But again, not wanting to admit to myself what was going on, I shrugged it off. I went home. My wife came home. We had a 9-month-old daughter at the time, so I picked her up from daycare. My wife came home and I told her, what was going on. And I remember saying, like, I don't know, I think I'm having a stroke. My wife is a surgeon, so she is, well-versed in the medical field. Strokes are not her specialty, but she said, you know what, more likely is you probably just pushed it. And going back to the show no weakness mentality and running through brick walls, I said, you're probably right. So I went to sleep. She left for work in the morning. Woke up the next day, had a little routine with my daughter. I would give her a bottle and then I would stretch while she played around. And while I was stretching on my hands and knees, I said, I want a cup of coffee. So I tried to stand up and I couldn't move at all. And I'm in a half kneeling position. What I mean, I couldn't move at all. I couldn't get up from the floor. So I'm kneeling on the floor. I try to rock forward and I can't get up. And it's not like there's pain or numbness or lack of sensation, but my muscles just won't fire. So I switch sides to the other knee, and I try to get up from that side, and I can't get up from that side. And there were 3 thoughts that went through my head immediately. The first one was, I'm probably going to die today. The second one was, I'm so glad that I did the fitness competition. We finished in 3rd place, by the way, so I was happy. And then third was, I got to go to the doctor. So I crawled over to the couch because I couldn't stand up. I crawled over to my couch, pulled myself up onto the couch with my upper body. Well, I don't even know what that effect is that I just...
If you're watching the YouTube version, we just got a really nice firework display.
Well, that's how I felt. Like there were fireworks kind of going off in my mind that this is a big moment. But I texted my brother. I said, you got to come watch Sophia, my daughter. I'm going to take myself to the doctor. He lives in DC. I'm in Maryland, so it's close by. And then I texted my wife downplaying it, saying, I think something's going on because it's hard for me to walk. So my brother came, watched my daughter, and I was able to get out of the couch if I used my upper body to kind of push myself up. And now instead of just the limp, my knees were kind of buckling as I was walking. So it was almost, if you've had a hard night out at the bar, and really struggling to get into the taxi, that's kind of how I was walking. A lot of sway, felt like I was going to fall with every step. Probably not the smartest thing to do, but I drove myself to a nearby urgent care clinic. I had a lot of difficulty getting in and out of the car, but I thought at this point, like, this is getting worse quickly. I need to do something about it. When I went there, they said, you need to go to the emergency room. And I asked, do I need an ambulance? And they said, well, you drove yourself here, so you could drive yourself there.
Oh my
So I said, all right. So I hobbled out, hopped into the car, drove to the ER, got out of the car for the ER. And then as I'm walking from the car to the ER, it gets much, much worse. And I'm literally almost falling. My knees are buckling underneath me, and I'm holding onto the side of the building as I move into the ER. When I go in there, the first thing they ask me is, are you on drugs? I don't think I look like a drug user, but you never know what those folks look like. I said, no, I'm not. But this is getting worse. I can't use my hands and I can't use my legs. I'll mention I can't use my hands. So my left hand, I couldn't bend it at all. I couldn't pick up a pen. My right hand is usable, but it's much, much weaker than it used to be. Like in holding the steering wheel, I really needed to lean into the steering wheel with my weight so I could steer the car. So I'll fast forward a little bit. I spent a little bit of time in the ER. They did blood tests, urine tests, MRIs, CAT scans, spinal tap. And basically what they came to was a conclusion, which turned out to be the wrong diagnosis at the time, but they thought I had something called Guillain-Barré, which just succinctly put is when you have an infection, your body fights off the infection and then it starts attacking your nerves. So it creates nerve damage. Spent a week in that hospital. I deteriorated a little bit more. I couldn't get out of bed at all. I couldn't get out of a chair. Like I said, I couldn't pick up my cell phone. I couldn't raise my left hand above my arm. And the whole time I'm just thinking, what's going on? I worked with some occupational therapists. Those are people who help you do fine motor skills, like opening a bag, like a Ziploc bag, or tying your shoes. And then I was also starting to work with physical therapists at the beginning, just doing PT in bed because I couldn't really walk. Then I was eventually able to walk with a walker. But again, this was kind of like, a static hold on parallettes or something because it was all upper body and very little legs. After a week there, they transferred me over to a ambulatory rehab facility at a different hospital where we did not just 2-a-days, but 3-a-days of more intensive occupational therapy and physical therapy. And then there's a little bit of time in between there where I was discharged, and then follow-on tests came to find that I have actually lesions in my brain and my spine. And my doctor told me that I have multiple sclerosis.
I guess my first thoughts is, and the way that you've explained it, is you've almost gone into this survival mode to preserve life, which we kind of do, don't we? When things are hectic in any area of life, we go, listening to it now, and even when you're telling the story, I drove, I probably shouldn't have driven, but you're in this survival mode. Do you remember in those moments, like how you felt about, okay, this hand is not working quite like it should do, or my knees are buckling? Like what was going on in your mind when this was happening?
So I think the most telling and true feeling I had, I'll go back to the first thought I had, which was I'm going to die today. Because truly, I never had a situation where my body was just shutting down. And Marcus, when I say it was a weird feeling, it didn't feel like a cramp. It didn't really feel like any pain. It's just kind of looking at my hand, telling my fingers to bend, and they won't bend. So I'm thinking my body's shutting down. I don't really know what's next, but this is scary. That's the clearest way to say it. It's scary. But very quickly after that, to kind of go back to my older version of the show no weakness, I told myself, like, you can't be fixated on this. You got to go do something. You can't just sit here and let it happen. So what I was feeling as I was going through the early stages was just honestly shock. What is going on? I wanted answers, which is why I think I also leaned into this diagnosis that they originally gave me, because that gives you some answers. But I just couldn't believe what was happening because I looked normal. I didn't feel sick. My mind was clear. My body, if I were just sitting in a chair or the bed, felt fine. There was nothing painful. So it was a big disconnect between what my body was able to do and how I felt, that it almost didn't compute. So I kind of laughed a lot about it and made light of it.
Wow. Once we get a diagnosis, as you said, you crack on with it. You go into the physical therapy. You do what you're told to do. We trust the medical professionals that are in place. Obviously, it's turned out that your initial diagnosis is not the correct one, Thom. But when you got the initial diagnosis, how did you feel about it?
Well, how I felt about it was reading about and talking to the doctors about Guillain-Barré is it's a fixed disease or a fixed illness.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is typically most people will recover fully or near fully 6 months to 2 years after they have it. So having that light at the end of the tunnel of a quantifiable, hey, I just got to go through this for 6 months, a year, was very easy and reassuring for me. I thought, I can, to use the Murph analogy, you get through the first run and it's downhill from here. There might be bumps along the way, but you could get through it. It's going to end at some point. So it was very reassuring.
But it wasn't right.
It wasn't right. And that's actually what made it more complicated, because I think, and it was kind of hard for me to talk about all this stuff up until recently. And then when the no weakness, more recent mindset kicked in, it was like, well, you should tell people that this is hard, that you're scared, that you have anxiety, because it's not a sign of being weak. I think particularly men have a hard time sharing those feelings. But it was scary when I went to the neurologist and they said, you have these things called lesions in your brain that we're seeing. And for folks who don't know lesions, you can think of it as a scab. So multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease, and the immune system basically attacks your central nervous system. And the central nervous system's the brain and the spine, and in MS, it can also be the ocular nerve. So the immune system will attack those parts of the body, deteriorate them, and then these scabs will develop. And if you think about it, scab is a remnant of an injury. You have central nervous system damage. You have an injury to that central nervous system. And when the doctors explained it to me that way, I almost really didn't believe them. Like, well, what are you talking about? Like, I have central nervous system damage to my brain and my spine. Like, is it a big deal? Like, am I going to get better? And the doctor who I saw initially, he kind of leaned in and he told me, he said, if somebody told me I have multiple sclerosis or might have it, I'd take it very, very seriously. And I think at that point, it clicked to me that this might not be just a 6 month or a 1 year thing, and it was worth looking into. But I felt kind of angry, honestly, with myself for just believing that I had Guillain-Barré, and also angry with the fact that this might not be a 6 month to 2 year process. And I think that's a normal stage of kind of processing things.
I guess if you look at the 5 stages of grief, anger is the second one, right? And then we move to bargaining, to depression, and finally to acceptance. One of those stages, which we could argue where it felt to, but you said it there. And we were talking about it before we hit record here today. You withdrew a little bit. You went off of social media, and you were already withdrawn. But like you said, for men, mental health, talking about it, feelings and emotions, it's not, I hate to say it's not normal for us, but it's not super normal for us.
It doesn't come easily, I think.
It doesn't come easily. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Did you withdraw? Did you know you were withdrawing?
I don't think so, because I was talking to a lot of people. Many people were coming to visit me. And the thing is, when I was in the hospital, they wanted me to wear a gown, and I just refused to wear it. But I was sitting there shirtless, and it's cold here, so I won't take the shirt off. But, I'm a well-defined individual.
Yeah.
And friends of mine would come in and they would say, like, you look great. And then I would say, but watch this, I can't even get out of the chair. And I would struggle to get out of the chair. Or the nurses would come in and ask me where the patient is. And I think, to answer the question about withdrawing, I didn't withdraw in the traditional sense. So I was still talking to people, but I think I withdrew from my emotions and my ability to self-actualize my situation, where I could remember having conversations with people saying, I don't even think this is really a big deal. I'm going to get better. Like, it's not, I don't know why everybody's calling me. And I think withdrawing from really recognizing what was in my heart and soul is the kind of withdrawal that I did, whereby it was a lot of downplaying it. I withdrew from reality, I think, because anybody on the outside looking at me not being able to get out of a chair would say like, yeah, even if it's temporary, this is a big deal for right now.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because then we go back to like stage one of grief where it's denial. It's not really a big deal. And maybe that the way that you've explained that withdrawal is maybe is denial in a little bit. It's like, it's not a big deal. And oh yeah, but there are people here telling me, and the doctor's sort of saying like, take this seriously, but maybe we don't in that moment want to believe it because of how we think it might play out and impact. Were there thoughts like that? Were there like, well, am I stuck like this forever?
I never thought I would be stuck like that forever, just because I think that I have a mindset where I would tell myself I'm going to figure it out. So I'm going to figure it out one way or another. But certainly being sent home from the hospital with a cane and a chair that I was supposed to be sitting on in the shower so I don't fall made me kind of doubt myself. And I guess the self-doubt was a big thing that I've been dealing with over the past year. And to get back also to the question, I think it took some external experiences of going through some pretty hard things in the early phase with respect to MS, falls particularly, and falling with my daughter being the biggest one while holding her, to take a step back and say, I need to reevaluate because clearly my mindset is wrong here. And I should be mature enough to acknowledge that my mindset is not as strongly based as I thought it was, and it needs to change in order for me to build that strength for the future that is going to get me through this challenging time.
That you've just said in a really positive and simple way, but I can imagine realigning your mindset. You've got home, you've got your cane, this shower experience, I mean, it's crazy that you fell with your daughter, all of these things. And now you're like, okay, I got that a bit wrong. I have to realign things because this is maybe a bit more serious than I thought, or maybe my action plan doesn't quite match what I've got here. Talk us through that realignment of the mindset, Thom, because that in itself is that's incredible.
So I have to give a huge credit to my wife for helping me through this and the changing of the mindset. And I think for anybody, whether they're a married person or have just very close friends or other people in their life who can kind of bring clarity or sometimes splash cold water on your face and say, wake up and realize these things, is super important for getting over adversity and getting through obstacles. And my wife really sat with me and allowed me to process all of these things. But at the same time, she talked me through her perspective of it. And I remember I wasn't able to drive when I got home, but we still had my daughter. And if she needed to go somewhere, if I needed to go to the buy something for her at the store, I told my wife, like, maybe I could just take the cane and walk with her in the stroller, and in a very loving way, she's like, are you hearing what you're saying? Like, it's not going to work. Like, how are you going to do that? There's hills and everything, and you're going to walk with a bag. And she created the environment for me to process these emotions. I'm not going to say that she changed my mindset, but she, in a very loving and supportive way, made me come to the conclusion that what I was doing kind of wasn't working. And in order for us to develop, I won't say survive, because I think that that's the base level, but kind of develop and go forward as a family, not only for myself, but for my girls, I needed to kind of realign the mindset. And it wasn't just kind of like a snap done situation. We worked through it together, and she very lovingly was there for me the whole time, despite her busy career and everything.
That's cool. That's really powerful.
And I think what I'll say is, and this is a phrase that I've really lived by, is that consequences create meaning. So I'll unpack it a little bit. When I fell with my daughter, I was trying to put her to sleep, trying to help out, be a good husband, be a good dad, and I couldn't get out of the chair I was sitting in. And I tried with all my might to get out of the chair, and as I cleared it, I collapsed, my knees buckled, and I'm on the ground with my daughter in the dark, and she's still asleep. But as a father, I never thought to myself that I wouldn't be able to do something as basic as that. And eventually, I crawled over to the crib. I was able to pull myself up and get her in, but I stood there and thought, like, what the fuck is this? The consequence of not being able to get out of a chair and put my daughter to sleep like that created so much more importance around that. So for folks who don't have kids or didn't go through this, what I'll say is that if you've ever injured yourself, let's say doing deadlifts, and you pull your back, usually for those people, the only thing you could think about doing is doing deadlifts for the next period of time when you're recovering. So in a greater kind of life phase, I think that the challenges that we experience, whether it's dropping your daughter or not having enough money to buy what you really want, those consequences create so much more meaning behind achieving those goals that I told myself, don't forget these moments, but build off of them and remember why you're doing what you're doing, because inevitably there's going to be more roadblocks, there's going to be more hurdles. But if you remember how you feel right now, laying on the ground with your daughter, not being able to get up, think about that when you're doing PT. Think about that when you get back to the gym. Think about that when you get back to running. I might not be there yet, but don't ever forget this moment, because it's going to allow you to build so much stronger in the future.
I think it's an amazing piece of advice, Thom, because we often move quite fast and we forget key moments which provide us a lot of purpose, a lot of drive, a lot of motivation, which that moment that you've described there and the way that you did unpack that is such a beautiful way to encourage people to not travel too fast and remember the moments, because they're the mental tools. That's a mental tool that you've just got in your toolkit, in your hand, forefront of your mind, wherever you want to figuratively put it. Constantly, when you're in time of trouble, you've remembered that, you've got clear vision of it, and you can just drop it whenever you need to, because it drives you so much, which is incredible.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, because you had an accident, a pretty serious accident some time ago. You spent time in the hospital, and I'm sure you had a lot of thoughts too. But one thing I'm sure that you felt, just knowing who you are, is I want to get back to doing what I was doing. And that drive, I think, is innate to a lot of people, but it's also something that you need to cultivate, practice, unpack, and work out too. So I think that you probably had a similar feeling with your accident.
I mean, it's like you said, you said it just before there. You pull your back doing deadlift, all you want to do is deadlift. You pull your calf running, all you want to do is run more, and all you want to do is stretch that calf as well. And it's like, the reason why it's pulled is because it was overstretched, and let's not stretch it. And it's almost big picture, small picture, isn't it? It's like zooming in. Okay, don't worry about the big picture, the longer term, but it's like, and that's what I was doing in hospital, is like, okay, what can I actually do right now? Mm-hmm. Is there something I can do right now? And we speak about this a lot in ultra endurance events, that there's something you could do right at that moment. Might not actually feel like it's propelling you forward in a race. It's just sit still, have a couple of minutes, and just let everything settle. And then we're going to go. And that's the hardest thing, especially in a race, because you're like, the clock's ticking. But the best thing to do, that's the same in CrossFit sometimes, isn't it? It's like, the best thing to do is just take that 10 seconds, try and get a few breaths in, because then maybe you'll jump up on the rings and do 5 muscle ups unbroken.
Yeah, 100%. And I think with that, that's something that was very hard for me, because I, feel like I'm a man of action. I want to always be doing something. And for a neurological injury, which is what I have, is very different than an orthopedic injury like a calf, So for me, when I came home, I was used to doing a lot of PT, pushing myself. And what I found was actually less for something like MS is more, because I pushed myself so hard in the PT at home, I would get on our stationary bike and go super slowly, but it was hard for me to do it. Later in the day, I would fall, and it would just be out of nowhere. And I would think like, well, initially I was like, well, you should PT better. And then I was talking to my doctor about it. He said, well, you should actually PT less or PT differently. And I think that sometimes we just have the blinders on because we have the pulled back or the pulled calf, and we just want to get back to doing the deadlifts or the running, that we need to take them off and say, well, what can I do differently that will allow me to get there? Because like you said, sometimes it's the less is more, or doing something a little bit different is going to get you there more quickly.
One of the things that we see, and we haven't really touched on yet, but one of the things that we see in situations like this is a lot of what we'd call the victim mindset. It's like, why has this happened to why has this happened to me, and being angry about it like that. And you spoke a little bit about anger, but did those thoughts jump into your mind? Like, why has this happened? How could I have avoided it? Have I lived wrong? Have I lived different? What, did you go through any of those kind of emotions?
Truthfully, I didn't. I didn't think,
Amazing.
Why did this happen to me? Because, from an early age, I've realized life is great. I'm a very positive person, but life is hard. And something is inevitably going to happen to all of us. And the reality is that, what I will say, it wasn't quite a victim mentality, but I thought to myself, okay, my younger self, and by younger self, I mean 1 year ago, never considered having a chronic disease, because MS, there's no cure for MS. I am on medication for it, but even with the medication, things can deteriorate. They're never going to get better, I guess is what I'm saying. But I thought as a young person, this is never going to happen to me. I'm never going to be cycling on the road and hit by a vehicle. I'm never going to have a chronic disease. And then when it happened to me, I said, well, why wouldn't it happen to me? It's got to happen to somebody. And the attitude that I had, honestly, was, if this had to happen to somebody in my family, I'm so thankful that it happened to me, because I know that I can get through it.
Wow.
Not saying that my mom or my brother or my wife can't get through it, but just let me burden the weight of that. That's
unreal. I'm going to hit a big fast forward, and then maybe we'll go back. Just a few weeks ago, you competed at the 2024 CrossFit Games in the, I don't want to butcher the category, so you're going to tell us the category, right? Because I don't want to say it wrong. Sure. And I know there's lots of different categories. First up, I want to congratulate you. Thank you. It's literally phenomenal, and it was there's a lot of interesting timelines, but I won't screw it up. Talk us through that, and maybe rewind that last year, because we've left off from falling over with your daughter and walking with a cane, and I've just hit everyone with CrossFit Games 2024, and there's a nice extra twist to it, which is your story to tell, mate. So let's roll with it.
Yeah, so I competed at the 2024 Adaptive CrossFit Games in the minor neuromuscular impairment category. So what that means is, I'll back it up. When I was recovering, I was doing PT, but as anybody knows, it's not as sexy or fun as working out. And I happened to have a good friend of mine who knew somebody who competed at previous Adaptive CrossFit Games. And he said to me, Tom, did you know that there's actually a neurological impairment division in the Adaptive CrossFit Games? And I said, no, I never knew that. I always thought it was for people who are in wheelchairs or missing limbs or things of that nature. So he connected me with this guy. We talked a little bit about it. I didn't have my MS diagnosis at that point, but the guy, his name is Brett Horcher, he told me, you can work out, whether you have MS or it's something else, you can work out and you're not going to hurt yourself. So I remember the first workout I ever did after this experience was some light, it was like 15-pound hang power cleans and sit-ups. And I was crying actually in the middle of doing it, because I was like, I'm so happy I can do something. So fast forward to that, I find out that this organization called WheelWOD was tapped to support CrossFit Inc. to run the 2024 Adaptive CrossFit Games. And they have a classification system because everybody's MS is different. That's another thing I should say. You know, for people who have MS, these lesions can be anywhere in the central nervous system. If they're in the brain, it might affect certain motor skills or vision issues. For me, a lot of mine are in my spine, specifically the thoracic spine. So my legs are primarily impacted. And what WheelWOD does for their classification is they ask you to submit medical paperwork. Then they have a sit-down interview with you. Kevin Ogar, whose name people might be familiar with, runs WheelWOD, sat and talked with him. And then I needed to film myself doing different movements. And from there, they categorized me into this neuromuscular minor impairment division. And for the neurological divisions, there are three categories. There's the minor, moderate, and major. So they put me in that category. Did the Open, did well in the Open, finished 8th in the world in the Open. Then we did semifinals, finished 6th in the world in semifinals, and got to the games, and ended up finishing second place. You know, 7 events over 4 days.
Wow.
And it was actually on the day, exactly 1 year to the day that I was discharged from the hospital, I was on the podium with the second place medal. And I couldn't have thought of a better kind of cap to the end of that year than something like that.
Can you explain that feeling?
The feeling was, I mean, such a boost of confidence. I mentioned it briefly that the past year has had I've had a lot of doubt. And I've mentioned I'm a positive person, but these feelings of self-doubt really crept in very heavily. And I want to just be clear that it wasn't even so much about the gym. Whether or not I could do a muscle up really didn't matter to me when I was falling with my daughter. And, but as we all know, through fitness, you can build confidence that you take onto other aspects of life. So I'll give you one story from the games, or if you want more, I'll give you more. But this one particularly,
as many as you want, yeah.
This one captures it. I said that my legs have really been impacted. I can't actually come up on my tippy toes on my right toes, so I have no flexion that I can support on my right side, and my left hip is very weak, and my quads have not kind of fully recovered. And that's fine. That's the new baseline. But I'm very apprehensive to do strength and lifting, heavy lifting type movements, particularly cleans, because of that. And there was a 1 rep max clean event, and, you know, didn't really talk too much about my brother, but my brother, who also started InnerFight back in 2009 with me, we've always been workout buddies, and he's done a lot of great things in the fitness space, but he was my coach. And we were sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast the few hours before this max clean event. And up until that point, I think the max clean that I had done was a power clean at 190, which was significantly less than I used to be able to do by nearly probably like 80, 90 pounds. And I told him, you know, this is kind of what I'm thinking about opening with, and maybe I could hit 215. But I definitely can't do 225. So we talked about the opening weights. We warmed it up when we got to the venue. I opened with 205. I hit it pretty good. 215, I hit pretty good for the second attempt, and it was a three attempts. And then I see him in the stands doing 225, showing me 225 to put on the bar. And I just thought to myself, fuck. I literally told him I'm not going to be able to do this. And I said, what kind of mindset is this? You're at the CrossFit Games. If you fail, you fail. But if you hit it and you make it, it's going to be great. And if you hit 220, you're going to wonder if you could do 225. So I'm talking to myself, and the judge is looking at me like, what's happening to this guy? Because I'm amping myself up, put 225 on the bar. I go for it. It feels super, super heavy. I hit it. I power clean it, you know, stand up with it. And that moment was the most emotional moment that I've had in the past year, probably in a positive way. I, after that event, couldn't help but let the tears flow. seeing him and seeing my family there, and then just thanking them for believing in me. So
Wow.
what the CrossFit Games gave me was a realization that the belief that other people have in my abilities should be my own belief, and it should propel me forward to lift heavy weights and to get after it like I know I'm able to.
That's incredible. Every event, I can imagine though, every event has like a spin like that because it's the CrossFit Games. It's the pinnacle. Now, you went into that thinking, okay, I can't go off on my right foot, my left hip's buckled, I've only done 190. And, like you say, you're a positive person and you put it together, but then you just somehow, you come to the party because it's the CrossFit Games. You go to 7 events. That was one of 7 of the events. They must all be kind of special in some sort of way.
Yeah, they certainly are. And I think many of the other guys, or 10 other guys in my division, I think 5 of them also have multiple sclerosis.
Right.
But it affects everybody a little bit differently. And they're all special in the respect that people's impairments, and me saying impairment is not disparaging myself, but it is an impairment, manifest differently. So I remember on the first event, it was a 2K row, a 1,500 meter ski, and then 75 calories on the Echo bike for time. And the guy who ended up winning it, he has MS, guy Josh Robinson. He collapsed because after he finished the bike, because that's just how his MS manifests. Like when he pushes himself, he can't stand at all. And for me, seeing that and talking to him about it afterwards actually was further motivation and further confidence, because he told me he feels the most kind of alive and like he's fighting his MS when he pushes himself to that place, because he knows that's temporary. After 15, 20 minutes popping the ice bath, he's basically back to where he was. And seeing that kind of gave me more confidence. So like I said, the weekend built my confidence up, and seeing how people's issues kind of manifested and how they dealt with it was super inspiring. And I told myself, if these guys can do it, I definitely can do it too.
It must be quite cool. Like the community feel in CrossFit is something that we all love and is super unique. Now you've found another pocket of something cool and unique as well. That must be. Are you still connected with the guys? Is there a community beyond?
Honestly, Marcus, this and I was there with some other people too who said this feels like OG CrossFit. Everybody's there truly feeling kind of a community feeling. Before I had MS and I would go to comps, people would kind of fist bump and you kind of like nod heads, but there was a little distance I've always felt between people.
Yeah.
Here, we're not talking about what our rep scheme is going to be necessarily, but we're really honestly cheering for each other, because everybody knows that this is a huge celebration to be able to do this. So going into the competition, I connected through social media with these 2 guys, Ben Fallon, who's over in Belfast, Ireland, and then also this guy, Adam Nelsick, who's in Chicago. They both have MS. Ben actually won first place at the Adaptive CrossFit Games in my division. But these guys have shared so much insight and been there for me as resources to kind of motivate me, but also to listen to questions I have, that competing side by side next to them was such an awesome, amazing feeling. And then also coming away with new friends too. Actually in a group chat with a couple different guys here. And it's just, we all do it because we love fitness, but at the end of the day, going back to the consequences create meaning. Like all of us were at one point or another not able to do the stuff that we're able to do today. And who knows what we're going to be able to do tomorrow with all that motivation and energy behind us. So yeah, I'm super, super thankful for that community of support of these 9 other guys in my division.
It's very cool, and I think you framed it really nicely there. It's like OG CrossFit, where it was almost an honor to be able to turn up and do a workout. And it must be I can't even sort of start to wrap my head around it for, there's a chance that in this workout, you might pass out, your legs might just go from under you, and all sorts of things could happen that we won't talk about, we won't tempt fate. But going into a workout like that, with that mindset, that this is just an absolute privilege that we get to be here. Who actually really cares? Okay, we care about the results because we want to push it, but the picture is so much bigger than that. And that's how CrossFit was way back in the day, before people, started talking about workout strategies and, how I'm going to break my reps and all the, which there is a place for that, of course, we know. And it's great that we've seen our community fitness regime go to such a competitive level that we have part-time professional athletes or whatever they call. But I can feel the vibe is so strong of, it's such an honor to be here, and it's such a gift to be able to work out. I'm still going to go as hard as I absolutely can, because like you said there, yesterday maybe I couldn't do this, and tomorrow, who knows? You really create this, and you said it a little bit earlier, you create this presence in life that is completely unique. Now I've got love hearts on the screen. That's amazing. You create this presence in life that is just, and meaning in the moment, that I think is not commonplace enough.
Yeah, it was to try to distill the feelings of the weekend into words is still something I'm trying to process and work through. But I just keep coming back to kind of the word of strength. And from that, what I mean is, strengthen yourself and your abilities, strength with your community members, your friends, and then just the mindset. Like, we started this conversation off with mindset. And it's one thing to go into a workout thinking, I'm going to do the best that I can. It's another thing to go into a workout saying, like, this is going to be a fucking celebration of everything I've worked for. And it's going to build on all those times that I've fallen. It's going to build on all those times I couldn't pick up the phone. And, honestly, who knows what tomorrow brings, whether it's my MS or something else. Be 100% present in this moment, give it your all, embrace the feelings of discomfort, and then just have a big smile on your face, because end of the day, this stuff should be fun. It's not a job, like you said, it should be fun. And competing against guys who are giving it their all like that, it's just such a validation of life that sure. It's really an amazing experience.
You always have been a positive person with an incredible mindset, Thom. But I can't help think that certain perspectives or outlooks on life in the last year may have changed a little bit. My question here is what was important pre your diagnosis and pre the symptoms really coming on strong? Have things shifted? Do you see life different? Do you live more in the moment? How do you feel about life now?
Well, I feel great about life now. I'll say that. Good. But the feelings, the feelings for me, the outlook for me has changed. And what I mean by that is my family is 100% the most important thing for me. And being there for my family is a pinnacle to that. I like to say that my daughter's my motivation, my wife is my foundation, and my mom is my inspiration. I have a lot of strong women around me. And before, I kind of took some of those things for granted, staying late at work and not seeing my daughter when she goes to sleep, or not necessarily making time to be fully present with my wife, or maybe not calling my mom as much as I should. But having this experience where I very suddenly lost the ability to be physically able to do what I could do made me realize, well, what's important is spending time with these people that I love and that love me back, because end of the day, work is going to be always there. You never know how much time you're going to have with your significant other. I'm learning now as a dad, my daughter's going to be 2 next month, that time goes by very quickly. So, spend the moment there. And also with my brother, who just got married over the weekend, actually, spending time with him and his new wife, building kind of these memories. That's actually what's going to help get you through the tough times, the family, and the connection. So yeah, family has become the most important thing to me now. And, fitness has been a big part of my family's way that we bond and connect. So it's very nice to kind of see them go hand in hand. So fitness and family have really become forefront in my outlook.
Yeah, I love that the job's always going to be there, or it's not, and either way you'll be fine.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, it's super true. Thom, you're an absolute legend. It's an inspiring story. We've been on for almost an hour here, and I could keep asking you questions all day, to be honest. But in respect of your time and in respect of our listeners, we'll sort of start to wrap it up a little bit. I wonder if you've shared inspiration and insight in so many different ways. Do you ever think, or could you try and articulate? Maybe you already have, and maybe it's just going back over something, but a year into this experience, how do you summarize it?
Summarizing, it's a good question. I think that I summarize the year probably through, let's go back to the InnerFight motto, show no weakness. But what that means, honestly, is going through a hard time and letting people know you're going through a hard time, I think is going to build the strength. So I think that showing no weakness for me over the past year meant coming to the realization that picking up the phone and calling a friend and saying, like, this is hard, and having a cry about it doesn't mean that I'm a less capable person. It doesn't mean that I'm a weak individual. I would actually argue bringing it from a male perspective, that being able to have those tears and those emotions go out and just have, a hug with a friend, that's going to show that you are a confident, strong person who's acknowledging their emotions. These are human emotions. Everybody has them. So I think that showing no weakness for me, like I said, has changed a lot. But in this past year, it's really solidified that being more open, being more honest, and being more present with other people is the true path to strength.
You're an absolute legend. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It all really truly began with InnerFight. I love the fact that we got on this call together. I love what you're doing, and the reality is that you really, whether you realized it or not 15 years ago, and I definitely didn't realize it at the time, helped me establish a mindset that I could cultivate over these past 15 years that in many, many ways I attribute to my ability to be successful in not letting this disease slow me down, and actually using the disease to do something I would have never been able to do before, which is compete at the adaptive CrossFit Games. And not only that, but take a podium spot. So Marcus, thank you very much for that.